Hello, this is Wings to Soar Online Academy presenting Homeschooling for Outside the Box Learning, Scaffolding for Success. This is a collection of some of my tips and strategies and key philosophies that I find myself saying over and over and over again in consultations with homeschooling families. So I put it all together into one workshop for you. You may hear bits and pieces that were something I shared in one of the other workshops if you chose to participate in the other workshops as well, because this is one that gathers together. Here's a lot of the key stuff that I want you to know as you're getting started with us. Or if you're just picking my brain about homeschooling, this is some of the stuff I would want to make sure you knew. So who am I? I am Beth Ellen Nash. I am the founder of Wings to Soar Online Academy. We create custom learning plans for outside the box kindergarten to 12th grade students, hybrid online homeschool option, where we see parents as our partners in education. So we partner with you. I am in charge of individualization, and I am the intervention specialist here at Wings to Soar. I am also a teacher, speaker, author, consultant, and coach, and a few other hats, so that keeps me busy. If you are emailing with Wings to Soar, you are generally emailing with me. That is typically who you were talking to. Before I briefly go into the content, Wings to Soar grew out of, I ran a brick and mortar school for 8 years in Madison, Wisconsin called Hope Academy. We had between 3 to 13 students each year, and I was speaking around the country at homeschool conventions, and I had people in over a dozen cities saying, "Oh, I wish your school were here. I wish your school were here." And so in 2011, I shifted online because I was hearing this cry from around the country. So instead of serving 3 to 13 kids at a time, we're now serving about 150 kids. Last I checked, we're in 30 states and 7 foreign countries that we're supporting, having a bigger reach than was able to have just with that little brick and mortar school. So that's what the thing that really excites me. I mean, my vision, my dream is that over the course of the next 50 years, we're going to be serving at least 1 million kids. A lot of our kids are outside the box kids. Many are dyslexic, but they're all wired to learn better, differently than the traditional school structure. Why people choose to work with us. It just excites me that those kids who are sometimes think of themselves as failures, if we can help them gain the skills and confidence for success, not just in school, but in life, the world changers that they are designed to be, empowered to not think of themselves as failures, to free them from those chains of failure, shame, and inadequacy, and free literally generations for greatness. That is my vision. So that's what I'm doing. And some of what I'm going to share with you today are some of my tips and philosophy that I hope to share with you as we embrace that vision together. So perhaps you are feeling overwhelmed. Maybe you're considering switching up some things in your homeschooling. Maybe you're considering pulling a kid to start homeschooling. Maybe what you've been using hasn't been working quite great. Maybe in some subject areas it's going great. Maybe you've got something that's working great for science and something's working pretty well for math. And you know what? You really need some help in the reading and language arts area or whatever it may be. So if you're feeling that way, take a deep breath. Too often we don't allow ourselves to take that time for a deep breath. And just that alone, taking a breather, taking a couple deep breaths in through the nose, out through the mouth, it signals safety and security to your brain. You're okay. Everything's going to be all right. So maybe that tip alone and an invitation to 3 deep breaths with me today. Maybe that's what you needed coming today. If that's what you needed, I'm glad we were able to give that to you. But remember that anytime, a couple deep breaths can go a long ways towards getting past whatever the overwhelm is. And that's for you and your kids. A couple deep breaths. You're starting to feel like your kids are going to hit a wall. When you're talking about outside the box learners, many times we try to keep pushing until they, just one more good minute, and then they hit the wall and we end up in tears. If you can take an intentional pause, an intentional reset, whether it's just a couple deep breaths, whether it's an intentional 2, 5, 10-minute break, and then come back when they're fresh, when you're fresh, you're going to get a lot more done than pushing for that one more good minute and hitting an inevitable wall. If you sense that the wall is coming, don't slam into it. Pause. Take a deep breath, literally or metaphorically, or maybe a intentional break, and you'll be able to push through more with those intentional brief breaks and pauses. And brief, maybe a couple deep breaths. It may be a balance on one foot to reset the right and left hemisphere of your brain and get them working better together again for 30 seconds. It may be sending the kids to go ride their bikes around the block for 10 minutes to get a little energy out. It may be having them jump on the mini trampoline, whatever it is, but building in intentional breaks is one way to take that break and that breath that's going to let us reset, recharge, and move on. So if you're feeling like you're just trying to keep your head above water, let's throw you a lifeline, throw you a lifeboat here, and let's see if we can partner with you to try to help you move beyond that. So we're not just trying to keep our head above water. Maybe you're struggling to find balance. I talked about this in one of the other workshops where I was addressing the academics and the whole person well-being and how important it is. Yes, I'm an online school. We focus on working on filling in academic skill gaps. So the academics is really important. And I know in one of the workshops I gave, I think in my 6 common mistakes homeschoolers make, I put a fairly strong emphasis on you need to make sure you get enough academic time in. And you do. We need to make sure we're getting enough time with the brain working on the academics. That is important. When a student messages me and says, Mrs. Beth Ellen, I'm really not feeling good today, my response is going to be your first most important assignment is to take care of yourself and get better. If you can tackle some of your other assignments while you're working on getting better, then please do. But your most important, and I had to apply that lesson to myself yesterday. I wasn't feeling very good. Sure, there's plenty of work to be done. There's lots to be done. And I listened to my body, and my body said, you need to go lay down for a while. Just put in some teaching tapes that you've been meaning to listen to and just listen. If you drift off to sleep, you drift off to sleep. I had to listen to my own, advice to the kids. So I truly see that as a important life skill to teach, to listen for what your body needs. I find that if I can give myself that rest when I'm first starting to get under the weather, I can nip it in the bud. And instead of I'm coming down with this cold or whatever it is, I'm fighting this off. I gave myself a few hours of rest. I'm working on fighting this off and giving my body what it needs. That's just an application for my own life recently. But whole person well-being includes emotional well-being. Sometimes I used to think, we've got good days and we've got bad days. And then I had one student back when I had the physical school who taught me that really it's moment by moment. I had to learn what was the highest good that I could do for him and all the students. At the time that year, we had 4 kids we were working with. What was the highest good in that moment with what he could do with where he was at? And sometimes that was sitting and reading historical fiction, read it aloud together, because that's what we could handle. Sometimes he was obsessed with Minecraft when Minecraft first came out. And it was having him write a couple sentences summary of the little Minecraft demo he had just watched somebody doing, to write a couple sentences about what that person had just done. That was what we could do some days. So in each moment, what is the highest good I can do with my student, my children in this moment? Sometimes the highest good is taking an intentional break and saying, we just need to bake some cookies and have some time to just relax together. Sometimes the highest good is maybe considering cutting some activity out of your schedule because you've got too much on your plate. And it's a great activity, but it's not serving us. And it's not what we need right now. Just really consider, where do you need to find that extra balance? So it's a question I just posed to you tonight. I'm going to try to pause just a little bit more than I sometimes do for reflection as I go on. I have a tendency of pushing forward, so I might forget, but I'm going to try to, when I ask you a question, give you a moment to actually think about it. So perhaps you're facing some tough choices. Maybe high school's coming up. Maybe it's in the fall. Maybe it's in a year or two, and you're trying to figure out, what do we need to get in place? We need to fill in some skill gaps, and we really need to address this hard now because we really want to set them up for their best high school experience possible. And sometimes high school's supposed to be next year, supposed to be chronologically, but they're really not developmentally ready. And what they really could use is a gap year. And I don't mean a gap year to take off school. I mean a year to just focus on filling in some gaps before we put the pressure of this is high school and it has to count for high school. I've seen some families who really would have been better served. They put their kid in all these high school classes because they're now in high school and we have to do this. And their student really needed 6 months to a year to really shore up some underlying foundations. They didn't have the time to do the foundational work that they had signed up for me to work with because they were so busy doing these classes that were really above where they were ready for. And so just evaluate those things as you're thinking about whatever that transition might be. Maybe you're at a different stage. Is there something that's needed to give my student the foundations? Maybe it's before they head off to college. It doesn't have to be 4 years of high school. Sometimes doing another year at home while they're, that what we thought was in 8th grade, let's call it 8th grade and let's give it another year now. Maybe you can do some dual enrollment courses, take advantage of some, really cheaper price tuition credit for some that you might be able to have access to for some dual enrollment, something like that, while they shore up some skills in another area. I have 2 students who are with us for their 5th year, senior year, because they had a really good experience in the writing class last year with us, and they wanted to take it and kind of polish this last year before they tried to launch into something else. By the way, in these teen years, don't have any teens yet. Just know you're going to get stupider for a few years. Don't worry. Don't worry. Sometime in their 20s, you're going to get a lot smarter again. It's amazing how dumb mom gets while they're in teen years and how really smart mom gets again a few years later. We're homeschooling for outside the box learning. I'm guessing, well, one, that's something you desire because you showed up to this call tonight. You're on this workshop. But also, most homeschoolers really don't want to just recreate school at home. They want something a little bit different. So they want the hands-on experiences, the time to be on the floor looking at the globe, exploring a book, looking up where is it, finding out some details that they maybe wouldn't have time to otherwise, exploring, expanding on a topic. Sure, the curriculum gave this lesson and they quickly moved through that lesson and that curriculum, but there isn't actually an interest. Well, let's go look up some more about it. Let's find out a little bit more. Let's follow that interest. The curriculum may have only taken them 20 minutes to get through. Let's find a book that supports that topic if they're engaged with it and dive a little deeper. We want to be scaffolding for success, building a bridge to helping them be the most successful outside the box learners they can possibly be. Wings to Soar Online Academy, my goal is to help provide some of that guidance, maybe a little compass for you to provide a guide. So maybe you're drained, your head's a little aching. Use this time together this evening as a time to recharge your battery a little bit. Maybe you need to just step back and get the big picture. Reevaluate, how am I doing? How's everything going? You know what? I bet there's some areas that are going really well. Even if there's something you feel like, oh, this is totally just not working. I bet there's some things that are going well. Celebrate those. And be honest with yourself if there's something that aren't working and maybe need, started back into school and you're like, this is just not working like I was hoping it would. We really need to switch some things up. You don't have to wait till a new school year to change things up. If you choose to work with Wings to Soar, we don't require that you do all or nothing with us. You can just work in the pieces that are what you need. Some of your key goals as a homeschooler, as a parent, but as a homeschooling parent in particular, should be to lay a solid academic foundation, to build a love of learning, to foster habits of mind and strengths of character, to help your child learn what whole person balance and whole person well-being means. You may need to learn some of what that means too before you to be able to model that for your child. Often, many of us were never given that kind of training of how to do that. And we may need to learn some of those. We're actually launching some parent courses and considering a parent-teen version of some courses to teach skills, finding balance, stress management, time management, organization, just a wide variety of whole person well-being skills that often nobody really has taken the time to teach us, and we've never really taken the time to learn. So some little mini courses to help with that. But whether it's a course or whether it's just being consciously aware of seeking out modeling that whole person balance, because your kids are going to catch more than they are taught. Things are caught, not taught. And so if you're modeling stressed and frazzled and the only thing that matters is getting an A, what do you think that they're going to focus on? So just think about what you're modeling in terms of whole person balance and whole person well-being. We also want to help them discover their uniqueness. How are they uniquely wired and gifted? And all of this is going to build towards lifelong success. I'm going to cover each of these in more detail throughout the next several slides, but this is kind of my overview of these are the things that are needed in a solid foundation for your homeschool. So talk about balance. That's that academics and whole person well-being. Physical balance also helps to reset. So things like standing on one foot, put a piece of masking tape on the floor and one foot in front of the other along the piece of masking tape, hopscotch, jump rope, mini trampoline, even a bike, you're constantly challenging the balance. Anything you're doing that's going to be challenging the balance, standing on your head, monkey bars. Now, some of those you can't do right now here in Wisconsin because there's teens temperatures, if we're lucky, outside and 6 inches of snow. But there's some of those you can do, even if the weather's inclement. Something to challenge the physical balance helps reset. And it doesn't have to be long. It can be even 30 seconds. Back at the physical school, I had a group of students and they were all struggling readers, and we'd take turn reading aloud, and that was normal. But they also were told that if you ever have a day that's just an off day and you need to ask for a pass, you need to ask to take a pass this time around, you could ask. Well, Dan he started to read, and he used to struggle. He's like, can you pass, please? And I had taught him to stand up and balance on one foot, and that a balance on one foot could help him reset. And he had found that really did help him. There's only like 4 or 5 kids in the group that we were reading, and he stood up, balanced on one foot. We came back around, he sat down and took his turn reading, and it was like a totally different kid. And his classmates were like, what was that? Because they totally noticed, like, he had been struggling and now he's back on. And so I taught them all the tool. I had another mom who I spoke at a homeschool convention, and she came and found me actually at a different convention the next year. And she said, that balancing on one foot trick you taught us, it works like 85% of the time to help my daughter reset. Thank you. That has been such a godsend. So just, again, it's not a miracle, but for her, it was life-changing. So just consider trying that. I mean, you can do all sorts of other kind of fun things or other more active balanced things, but standing and balancing on one foot is something you can do if you're feeling overwhelmed or just off. You're standing and having a conversation with someone. It doesn't have to be, heavily lifting one foot off the ground, in a fancy way. You could just kind of, even tripod stands, barely touch a toe on the ground. We all shift how we stand on a regular basis. It's something you can do in a real world adult context. Your job, you're getting a little off, you're just getting a little flustered, stand up behind your desk and just quick balance for a couple seconds. Take a stretch and balance. You can do that behind a cash register. I mean, you can do that in many, many real life situations. Somebody standing at the booth and talking to somebody at a conference. Sometimes I get just distracted by everything else going on around me, and a quick balance recheck can help me reset. So just a suggestion. What I said earlier, I think I mentioned it. I forgot I put this slide in here. I want to make sure to mention the break thing earlier. Take intentional breaks. How many of you keep pushing and you want to get that one more question done? How many of you know that the inevitable wall is going to come and we better just get a little bit more done? Let me encourage you that some parents have told me that just by that advice, stop before you hit the wall. When you see it coming, because you're a mom, you're pretty smart. Most moms are, and you know your kid pretty well. And when you see the wall coming, take an intentional break. I suggest, when you're working with your student, you gauge what kind of level break. Is this a 3 to 5 minute break? Okay, then offer your child the choice. Do you think we should take a 3-minute or a 5-minute break? Does it really matter to you whether it's 3 or 5? They're probably going to say 5. Okay, great, let's do that. Now, if you really think they need more like a 7 or 10-minute break, then offer them a 7 or 10-minute break. What do you think? A 7-minute break time or a 10-minute break time? Whichever they say, go with it. It doesn't matter. As long as you make the choice, something you're okay with, the fact that they got to choose is huge. You need them to wrap up, pick up the toys. Hey, we're going to be having dinner pretty soon. Do you think you need 3 minutes or 5 minutes to get your toys picked up? Again, if you really need it in 1 or 2 minutes, then don't give 3 or 5 as the choice. But if 3 or 5 is perfectly fine by giving them a choice, it's not that, are you going to pick up your toys before dinner? That wasn't the choice. It was 3 or 5. Any given time, it may be, is this a 15-minute break or a 20-minute break? Sometimes that's the kind of length you need. That's just one place you can give a choice that when you give them some choices in their choice bank, anything you can do to give them a little extra choices where it doesn't matter, don't give the choice if it's not truly okay. Which activity are we going to do to practice our spelling words today? And it's a day we have about 5 minutes before we need to head out the door to gymnastics class. Don't offer, we're going to finger paint today. That's not one of the choices. Do you want to trace that on your leg, or do you want to trace it on the carpet today? Your spelling word that you're practicing. Neither of them take any time, any resources. We can get the activity done without having to get anything out. Now, if it's a rainy afternoon and the kids are going to be going stir crazy, you're going to have to keep them occupied anyhow. Okay, do you want to do finger paint, or do you want to make the words on Wiki Sticks today? Again, it doesn't matter, but it's something that's a little more time consuming and it takes some getting out some supplies. Your goal was to help keep them occupied. This was a good day to pick out one of those activities. So again, just choice matters. So one of our goals, one of our foundations, is to build a solid core of academic skills. Now, some of those skills involve speaking, listening, phonological awareness, let's say sound discrimination and being able to manipulate the sounds within words, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, reading comprehension, spelling, handwriting, grammar, usage mechanics, and written composition. Those are some of the reading and language arts skills, and I think math is down there at the bottom, hidden by my toolbar. So core academic skills. You may notice that most of those are reading and language arts skills. And I list them all out separately because sometimes we say, we think about our subjects in our day. We have this idea that we should be getting our English done in the same amount of time as we're spending on our math. Maybe they were spending on our science or social studies. And there are so many different skill areas that are really a part of your English that you really do need to plan for more time for English. A lot of people just assume we should be able to get done with every subject in less than an hour. 45 minutes to an hour, we should be able to be done. Well, if you think about it, not every one of these skills are you going to necessarily be working on at all stages. You're probably not working on phonological awareness at the same time as you're working on written composition. If they're still working on the sound level of figuring, discriminating the sounds, we're probably not working on written composition skills. And we may not be even targeting grammar usage mechanics yet if we're still working on shoring up some foundational phonics skills. They may not need curriculum in listening or speaking necessarily. Although if they're having difficulty with expressing themselves, they may need to work with a speech and language therapist. So they might need something. Handwriting, they do need to have at least legible enough handwriting that they can fill out a form and sign a check at a very minimum. If they're struggling with handwriting in today's modern world, we actually don't use handwriting all that much. Spend your time and energy working on typing rather than working on handwriting if we're getting to 9, 10, 11 years old and we're still struggling with handwriting. I'm not saying don't try to lay a foundation with some solid handwriting skills, but if you think about how we actually communicate in today's modern world, it's mostly through typing. And so that would be at a foundational level, yes, we should get some handwriting skills, but you may choose to redirect your energies to some typing. Spelling, I recommend, if you've got a kid who's struggling in particular, top 1,000 most common words that make up 90% of written English. So there's 1,000 words that make up 90% of written English. The next 1,000 get you another 5%, and another 1,000 gets you another 2%. So the top 3,000 words make up 97% of written English. Focus on those top high frequency words and then any other personal words that they have a topical interest on. Just a couple thoughts for you there. All of these underlying skills, so phonics, vocabulary, spelling, grammar usage mechanics, all build to, actually I didn't organize this the way I meant to. I used the slide in another talk and I reorganized it in the way I thought. So spelling, grammar usage mechanics, handwriting, all build towards written composition. Phonological awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, all build towards reading comprehension. If there's any of those sub skills that are weak, you want to separately work on those skills to be helping to build those skills up when they're in a targeted way, that they're working on an exercise that's just working on the phonics skill. And at some point, you do want to have them some practice that's putting it all together, whether that be for reading comprehension or in composition. But if, for example, they're really struggling with spelling, handwriting, grammar usage mechanics, they may need you to be a scribe for a while for their composition, to have you write down, so that they can actually get their thoughts out at their intellectual level, at their intelligence level, at the level of their really good thoughts and thinking, and see themselves as a writer. See themselves as a writer without being held back. For me, it was handwriting. Handwriting was a huge difficulty for me, especially third, fourth grade. We were learning cursive and the teacher started expecting us to use cursive for our work, and I had not mastered the skill well enough. And trying to use it in my homework, I was in tears so often. If my mom had been told, scribe for her and then have her copy it, my handwriting would have been much better because I could have been just focusing on the handwriting aspect at that point. And I could have gotten my thoughts out without having to, erase so many times that I was erasing holes in the page, literally, and in tears, because I couldn't get the letter made properly and hold on to the thought and keep the idea in my head. So just having her be a scribe and then me copy it would have gone a long ways towards helping me with that area. So if there's a skill, a sub-skill that's weak, you may want to provide some supports for it. Something like spelling. If you're going to write about a topic, brainstorm a list of a word bank together ahead of time. I'm not convinced that memorizing how to spell hieroglyphics or mummification or pyramid is the most highest priority spelling words. But if they're going to write a paper about ancient Egypt, having those words spelled correctly in a list brainstormed in front of them could go a long ways towards helping them use the words correctly, not shy away from words that they really would have wanted to use. If you brainstorm together what those words should be and write them out so they can copy them when the time comes, it can empower them to spell it correctly and not put an undue memory load on the brain of, how do I spell that not common word that you're not going to use all that often. So there's just a few thoughts for you. I definitely went into this in more depth in one of the other talks. Habits of mind and strengths of character. That is another area that you want to focus on. And you actually have the wonderful gift when you are homeschooling of being able to focus on. Now, as I mentioned before, most things like character and life management are caught more than they're taught. You can do curriculum to work on some of these things. We actually, probably not this next year unless I get enough requests for it. We have actually a little course that I taught a couple years ago called Habits of Mind and Strengths of Character that at some point here I'm going to resurrect. And we also have another course called Becoming the Me I Want to Be I'm going to resurrect as well. But So we focused on some different topics intentionally over the course each week over the course of a year. If there's enough interest, I'll bring that back again. So there's a place for teaching and consciously focusing on a topic, but there's also just in your life, what are you modeling? And being intentional about what am I modeling for my kids? What do I want? There's a book I'm going to write at some point. It's in here, but it hasn't been able to be a priority yet, is Becoming the Me I Want My Kids to Be. Because far too often in the raising kids years, you're so busy as a mom and everything, all of your time, all of your resources goes towards something for the kids. Something for the kids. It's not until the kids start leaving home and they're an empty nester that moms start taking time to do their own personal growth work. And sometime, in their 40s, 50s, when their kids are starting to leave the nest, they start diving in a little bit deeper within. And unfortunately, by putting it off and making it all about your kids, you're not able to do the work that's going to let you become the role model that you really want to be. But we all have areas. We all have areas where we can grow. We all have areas where we can improve, where we can just learn to become a better version of ourselves. Hopefully we're continually doing that till they breathe our last breath. But think about what you're modeling with your kids. And whatever it is, when you're making a choice and you're doing something, is taking that shortcut. Is that what you want to model? Maybe it is. Maybe how to take that shortcut is what you want to model. And that's actually a really important skill, just a life skill. Or maybe it's cutting the edge off of integrity, and it's not fully in integrity to take that shortcut because it wasn't what I said I was going to do. It didn't follow through on the spirit of what I actually said, even though by the letter I could follow through on that. Again, whatever it is, you're the only one who can judge whether at any given moment. But I just want to remind you that with being homeschooling, you have the incredible opportunity to be with your kids and intentionally model whatever habits of mind and strengths of character that are important to you and your family. As you do that, and you should go about in your daily life, far more important than what you read in a devotional together. Not saying you shouldn't have a devotional time if that's important to you. Nothing wrong with that by any means. That's one thing we can model of being intentional about feeding into our brains what we want to be becoming more like. But what they see you do and live is going to be far more important than having a scripture verse on the top of your math page in your curriculum or whatever. So just a reminder of that important building block in your homeschooling. This book, Habits of Mind, there's a series of books about the habits of mind. This one happens to be Learning and Leading with the Habits of Mind. But these were 16 essential qualities for life success that these authors came up with. So in that Habits of Mind and Strengths of Character course, we wove these in throughout the year and had some intentional work on each of these skills along with some other strengths of character. So gathering information, reflecting on it, gathering information using all the sentences, teaching questioning skills, metacognition, which is thinking about your thinking, listening with empathy, attending, so paying attention to whatever, persisting, how long do we stick with a task before we give up, managing our impulsivity, striving for accuracy. It doesn't necessarily mean perfection. It doesn't mean we have to be perfect, but that we should be seeking to do our best in a situation. Communicating with clarity, generating new ideas, the category, thinking flexibly, creativity, finding humor, responding with wonderment. Like, it's just so much fun to, like, you on an airplane, you hear a young child who's looking out the window for the first time, and you can tell that they've never been on a plane before, and they're just in awe. It always makes me pause. I've flown so many times for work. I fly fairly often. It always makes me just, oh, yeah, it is really beautiful and amazing. We can have this view and do this. So just use those moments and take those moments when your kids are responding with wonder, or to encourage those moments. Applying past knowledge to our new situation, intentionally thinking about responsible risk-taking, thinking independently, and always being a continuous learner. So again, I have another whole talk I give on this topic, but this was just a quick catch, a few things to remind you to be intentional. We also want to foster a love of learning. Whereas the core academic skills, reading, language arts, math, writing, history, science, all of your core academics are important, we also want to make sure we find a balance and make sure we have time for exploring additional interests. Theater, a chance to explore some theater, some art, or tinkering and inventing something. Music, exploring some creative writing, a little bit of travel, doing some sort of experiments, tinkering with, making a mess in the kitchen together or in the garage, perhaps. Whether that's a co-op class that you're exploring, some sort of after-school outlet, or just a personal interest. Make sure you allow some time for just building a love of learning, that it's not all about drudgery and, oh, I got to do this. And here's the responsibility side. We want to foster that. We want to embrace the uniqueness that is each of our children. Our little bouncing dude there. So I've written a book called Dyslexia Outside the Box, and an image similar to this is on the front cover of my book because 1 in 6 individuals have dyslexic tendencies. So he represents my little dyslexic 1 in 6. But each of your kids, whether they've got just the uniqueness of a dyslexic brain wiring or whatever their uniqueness is, has their own talents, gifts, passions, interests, strengths, and weaknesses. Now notice weaknesses was 1 out of a list of 6 categories there to be thinking about. Make sure you take time to explore and embrace your child's talents and gifts and passions, then figure out what their interests are. What areas are they strong in? What are they good at? Make sure to praise those things. When they're doing well with something, make sure to give them some thumbs up, give them some accolades for that. Also, if they're working on an area that's been weak for them and they do well with it, they make some progress. Now, it may be they're a 6th grader and they're actually working on 2nd grade spelling words because that's where they are. But if that's where they are and they did a good job with what they're doing on today's lesson, you can still, way to push through. I know that was a little tricky today. If that word was truly tricky for them and they've been having trouble, you've been having trouble with that word. You got it right. Awesome. Way to go. It doesn't have to be something that they're advanced in or accelerated that you can celebrate. If it's something that had been a struggle. If they've been learning how to set the table, your little one, they're learning how to set the table and they've been forgetting to put out the spoons, or they've been putting them not where you had taught them to place them on the table, or, they folded the napkins particularly neatly today. And that's something they've been working on. Make sure to notice it. The little positive things we can praise, hidden within the word praise, is raise. We raise someone up when we give them specific praise. And the more specific, it's not just good job or you're a good person, but like a specific thing that we can praise goes a lot further towards raising someone up than just a generality. So along with those strengths, encourage you to have time that you devote into your schedule for each of your students to have a personal passion project. Whatever that may be. It may be that they build little claymation videos. It may be that they're super interested in ocean life and right now they're fascinated with dolphins and they're watching every video about dolphins they can find and reading every book they can find about dolphins, sketching dolphins. And maybe it's basketball and they're learning some new trick and new shot in basketball they've been working on. Maybe it's crocheting. Whatever it is, in the adult world, we don't get jobs in things that we're bad at. We get jobs in areas that we're good at. If they don't have a time, again, we work with Wings to Soar with filling in skill gaps for kids who are struggling in many, many times. That's what a large portion of the focus of their work with us. But we also want them to be spending some time, and you at home are more uniquely able to help them pursue this than I can with curriculum. These things don't tend to be as curricular. They might be academically connected and they might be able to further some academic skills through it. That's important. If the passion project, maybe it's a 3-week interest. It doesn't have to drag on it doesn't have to be months long for it to be a valid personal passion project. Now, it could be, for someone, it may be a 3-week interest. For someone else, it might be 3 months. And for someone else, it might be 3 years or 30 years. That thing that they were good at and explored, and maybe they're fascinated by archaeology and they start reading and researching and finding out cool stuff. And eventually they go on some short project and, on some field team and wow, that was really cool. And they end up getting their PhD in it and becoming a world-renowned archaeologist. Who knows? They won't have a chance to find those things out if we don't have time to explore those personal passion projects. And I encourage you to consider not using that personal passion area as the thing that's the carrot or the stick. You get to do this if you do X, Y, or Z, or you get that taken away. You were sassy with your younger sister. What does the fact that they have a passion about dolphins have to do with the fact they were sassy with the younger sister? I think personal passion project time, there should be some time. Maybe it's only 15 minutes. Maybe that's all you can carve out on a given day. That it's not a earned this. It's just we've got our personal passion project time now. Of course we're going to do that. So just encourage you to make it, and of course, and something you build in as a priority. I encourage you to think about your child's learning styles, and each of your child's learning styles is important because just because what's right for one of your kids does not mean it's right for all of them. Each of them, do they work better in the morning or later? It might be easiest and most convenient for us as the adult to we're going to have breakfast at 7:30 and we're going to do devotions at 8 and we're going to start school promptly at 8:30. Well, one of your kids might actually be better off having done 2 hours of some more independent type work before breakfast ever happened, because that's just their wiring. Whereas your teen who's always been wired a little bit lower of a late riser, and as their teen years, their biological clock, their biology is just shifting a little bit into those age. It's pretty normal. They tend to sleep a little bit later. Maybe they need to eat breakfast, do devotions, and then start school. Whereas the other student maybe already have several things already done. Take advantage of it rather than making it a rigid, this is when and how we do it, but be intentional about it too. Don't just be laxative as well when we start. Whatever that is, the wiring for an individual, make it more of this is what we do. This is how it's structured. Does individual student learn better alone or together? Do they need it quiet or do they need to talk? I always encourage families to think about what resources are needed to balance out. Maybe it's computer time. You've got 2 computers and 4 kids. Who needs to be on the computer when? Who needs quiet time during this particular learning activity? They're going to be on with their math coach right now. Would not be a good time for the younger ones to be running around playing in the background. They should be doing something else, either running around playing elsewhere or doing something quiet right then because your 10th grader is on with their math coach. Some quiet time might be a valuable resource that you need to make sure that some of your kids in particular have for certain activities. Do they need snacks or not? And I'm not talking about munching on chips. I'm talking about healthy popcorn or some carrots, something that's a healthy choice. But some kids really do need to munch. They need something in their mouth that helps to distract them. And some kids are just fine with a designated snack or meal time and we're no problem. But some need something. Certainly having a water bottle handy to be sipping water is helpful for everybody. Our brains need hydration and far too many of us don't get enough. Do they do better with warm or cool? If your house tends to run cold or there's somebody who really needs it cooler, you need to have extra layers and blankets so the ones who need it warmer can not be freezing. Otherwise, they're not going to be the focus. Need it brighter or darker? My mom would always be like, turning on some more light. And I didn't necessarily want it quite so bright. Now that I'm in my mid-40s, I needed a little more brighter, and I understand because I need a little more light to see better. So they may or may not need another light on just because you're feeling like they need it. If it's for you, acknowledge, I need some more light for this task I'm doing. Not, oh, we need to turn you on some more light, honey. That's not how they're wired. It might be overwhelming to them. Do they learn better sitting at a table, on the floor, on the couch? Now, do be careful. This little guy here in our lower left working on his laptop, as moms see his screen right now. And that concerns me. I want to be able to see what's happening. Even if they're a good kid, it's just easy to get sucked in and tempted to be someplace where you weren't supposed to be. Not saying being not someplace naughty even, just someplace intriguing. Even if it's something cool, something just, even edifying, if it's not what you should be focusing on. So just kind of be careful about having computer screens in mom's eyesight so that they know and you know that anytime I can glance and I know what's happening. I know what's going on the computer. But laying on the floor, not a problem. Being on the couch could well be a good thing. I had one little boy, he was actually, I think, 13 at the time. He liked to drape across 2 office chairs, in front half his body on one, he'd have his book on the floor, then his back end would be wiggling on that other chair. You know what? I got far more focus and far more work done, and actually far more legibly by letting him be in that position than if I had forced him to sit at a table and try to sit still, and his little body wasn't wanting to sit still. So sometimes unusual positions. I had a balance board in my classroom where if the student would need to balance on it to help, and again, let them reset their brain. I'd have kids, they knew that, sure, go grab the balance board if you need it. Maybe they need to sit on one of those exercise balls so they can do a little bit of movement, which also helps strengthen the core, by the way. But sitting on an exercise ball rather than a standard chair perhaps might give them a little bit of movement. Are they more auditory, visual, or kinesthetic in their learning style? We also can think about whether they take in better. So sometimes we take in better through one means, but we actually process better another way. I take in better seeing it, reading or images, but I process better talking it out. And I feel things very deeply and they connect to me very deeply if it's kinesthetic. But I'm not at all, I never used to think of myself as a kinesthetic person because I'm not athletic. I don't have very good 3D visual spatial skills and that kind of stuff. But if I'm experiencing something in a kinesthetic manner, it really connects to me on a deep level. And I'm very much a physical touch love language person. So that aspect of kinesthetic really is pretty big for me too. So thinking about in different areas, it may or not be they're all one or the other of visual or your kinesthetic. It may be one is for how they process, one is for how they take in information, and one is for how they just more deep, impactful, deeper level. So our goal of all this is to help our kids flourish and thrive and become successful startup adults. And that's ultimately the goal. We want them to be able to move out into the world on their own and be a successful startup adult. So that's the goal in all of this. So what do we need to do to scaffold for success? Don't just try to recreate school at home. Just because that's the way they do it in the school doesn't necessarily mean that's how you should do it. Many things that they do in the school are because they need to manage a class of 25 or 30 kids. They're doing the best they can with that unfortunate scenario of trying to manage that many kids. That's not ideal. So don't feel like whatever it is, if it's just because that's the way school does it, question that. Is that serving us, our family, my child, the way we're doing this? Is that because I'm trying to do what I think I should do? Or is it because it's actually serving us well? If having a schoolroom with desks and that kind of structure serves you, by all means, do it. If starting school promptly at 8 a.m. every morning works well for you, great. I do encourage you to have a regular start time. I know in my world, if I were being homeschooled, having my school day start about 10 would be about right. That would be, there are very few morning appointments available if you ever try to schedule an appointment with me. Because I ask you, do you want me when I'm at my best? Or do you want a morning appointment? Because I'm not at my best first thing in the morning. That's not when I'm going to serve you best. So create and structure your day. Do create some structure and regularity, but structure it around what's right for your family. So some of the things needed to scaffold for success, it's important to start where your student is. Sometimes we assume that because they're a sixth grader that they should be doing sixth grade level curriculum. That's not necessarily true because it's very typical. I don't remember if I said this on a slide here or not, that kids have a 3 to 5 year grade span within themselves, maybe even more. They may be a sixth grader still filling in some second grade spelling words, but they've got a 10th grade vocabulary. Their writing skills, maybe fourth grade, reading a little bit behind fifth, sixth, but not by much. We're pretty close to solid there on their comprehension. But honestly, their phonics, there's still some gaps at third, maybe fourth grade level. If I were to pick, say, oh, well, I know they're a little behind. So I'm going to pick a fourth grade reading curriculum for them, or fourth grade English curriculum. Well, I wouldn't have met them in many areas if I had chosen a fourth grade English curriculum. It'd be better to put together all the components at the pieces where they are. That's the approach that we use at Wings to Soar. So we start where they are by doing free, what we call our just right level placement assessments. And so that's an academic assessment, not diagnosing anything, just where are their skill gaps? And then we build a plan to fill in those skill gaps. We encourage parents to provide accommodations, things like being the scribe or using audiobooks or audio supported text while they're working on filling in these skill gaps so that they can continue to build background knowledge and content learning at their intellectual level. So they can keep learning science like a sixth grader at sixth grade level kind of content, even though maybe they're still struggling with some fourth grade reading skills. And I can't expect them to write out the answers in the sixth grade curriculum quite as fully as sixth grade would expect because they can't write at that level yet. But I could take some dictation, be a scribe, or I could let them use a voice typing tool to get those thoughts out. So those are some things. So if you haven't done our Just Right level assessments, go to the website, wingstosooronline.com, and we encourage you, whether or not you're going to work with Wings to Soar, you're welcome to do the assessments. If you are interested in working with us after you do the assessments, we have our 2-week jumpstart, which is a chance to trial a work plan created based on their assessments, based on the subject areas you tell me you're interested in, having them possibly work in online curriculum with us. So you do a 2-week jumpstart to ease into the programs and see whether it's a good fit and start working on filling those skill gaps. So that's how we work if it's something you choose to work with us. Whatever curriculum you use, though, whether it's with us, anything else you choose, you are teaching a child, not a curriculum. It's important to allow your curriculum to be your guide, not your taskmaster. Just because the lesson said we should be moving on and they're still struggling on it, we need to pull out some alternate worksheets or some other way of working on it to continue working on that skill. But just because the worksheet said that there are 20 problems on this skill doesn't mean they have to do all of them. Maybe they do every other one. And then they go back and fix any that they had incorrect and do one more problem correctly for any one that they had wrong so that they, 1, have an incentive to do it correctly, and 2, get some reinforcement of how to do it correctly in their brain as a brain skill. But if they're flying and getting it, and they do every other one, and they've got them all, and they got it, move on. Maybe you get through 2-3 lessons because it's going along really quickly. Probably some other time we're going to hit a plateau, and they may need a week on a skill before they move on. So follow the child. I did put the slide in here. I couldn't remember Most kids are not a grade level package. That 3 to 5 year span or more is normal. And even more so if they have learning challenges. So we need to assess to find each student's just right level in each skill-based subject area. Like I said, we offer those assessments, or you can use other sources, other tools to help you figure out where they are and start where they are in each skill area. Back down to their level to fill in any skill gaps. Let's talk about that 6th grader that mom was considering putting in that 4th grade curriculum because she knew he was behind. Well, we also had some 2nd and 3rd grade skills, some 2nd grade spelling and some 3rd grade phonics skills that we really needed to fill in. Sometimes moms resist the idea of, well, if I go back that far, how are we ever going to catch up? First of all, if you work with our style, our approach, we're not going back that far in everything. We're only going back there in the specific skill strands where they're struggling. If we're going down to a level where they can be confidently, independently successful, be amazed at how quickly we can see progress. It is very common first semester we see a year or two's gains with kids who are working with us. It's just not at all uncommon that we're going to see some pretty quick early gains, and that building that confidence and success. So backing down to their level where they can be confidently, independently successful, and gradually bumping up the time and intensity at that just right level allows them to make much further progress. And we probably would get further than if I started that student who really had 2nd grade skill gaps in spelling at a 4th grade spelling level because they're a 6th grader and mom didn't want to back up so far because how are we ever going to get there? Usually depending on how far behind a kid is, within 1 to 3 years, we're able to get them caught up. And so, if we take the bigger picture, not where they should be right now, but within the next 1 to 3 years, depending again, how far behind they are and how diligently they actually use the plan that we've set out. Again, whether it's a plan with us or whatever other plan you're coming up with for intervening, working with your kid. If you work the plan, put in the time, they can catch up if you start where they are and fill in. Because you need a foundation, any skill-based subject. Go as slow as they need, but as fast as they're ready. Now, I don't mean as slow as they want to drag their feet, and I don't mean as fast as Susie Supermom down the street is going. Because just because Susie Supermom is done with her homeschool in 3 hours every day does not mean that actually is the ideal. I would rather have them spending 5 hours enriching their learning rather than whipping through in 3 hours to get it done and I finish my curriculum for the day. I would rather have them spending a little more time in actually building on enriching their learning. And if they're catching up, they probably need more anyhow. They may need to take it a little slower, and that's okay. And we're backing down. So we need whatever it is, as slow as they need, as fast as, and that can vary from day to day and moment to moment. Pace they're going along the past 2 weeks, they've been going along a certain speed, and then they hit a plateau in a skill and they need to really slow down. Not because they're dragging their feet, not because they're being naughty, but because their brain needs some time to solidify a skill. So it's not going to always be a steady rate. There's going to be maybe a quick gain, a little bit of a plateau, a little bit more of a up. That's all very normal. So always go as slow as they need, but as fast as they're ready to go. One of the benefits you have as a homeschooler is you can individualize the attention in the way that a classroom teacher can't. Even if you have 4, 5, 6 kids, you can give far more individual attention to those 4, 5, 6 kids than a classroom teacher with 25, 30 kids ever can. She may want to, but there's just so much she can do with that many kids. And so in your homeschool situation, even if you've got a number of kids, you can provide much more individualized attention. Embrace that. Now, if you're feeling behind with technology, I encourage you, get over it. I say that in all love. If you model, I'm afraid of technology, I'm afraid of computers, I can't do this, that models that for your kids. And they cannot afford to not be comfortable with computers and technology in today's modern world. Most jobs in today's modern world need comfortability with a computer. And so don't shy away from doing stuff on the computer. I don't say that just because I run an online school. Whatever it is you're going to do, tools, using Google Documents, using Google Slides. Your kids need to be able to create a Google Slide presentation, or PowerPoint would be the fancy paid version, but the free version is Google Slides. They need to be able to create a presentation about something. Don't shy away from it because you don't know how. You can Google just about anything and get instructions on it or a video on it. So if you don't know how to do something, whatever it is, little tip, punch it in Google, search in your search bar, whatever it is, whether it's a technology skill, even if there's a math question you're having trouble helping your student on, and put the question in that you're trying to figure out and see somebody's explanation. Use the tools. It's so important in today's world. So don't shortchange the academics. Do build in all the time for all those fun things. Do build habits of mind and strengths of character, but make sure you get enough core academic time. Went over this in a little more depth in one of my other talks recently. What you're not seeing at the bottom of the screen, I wish it hasn't cut off, is each of these columns shows up to be an hour and a half to 2 hours total of reading and language arts time. And that includes some independent reading type time, not just, all bookwork, schoolwork. If you're working with us, we're going to create a personalized learning plan for your child. It's going to spell out and break apart all these different pieces. And maybe a program that's going to work 10 minutes in vocabulary, another thing's going to work 10 minutes in spelling. You may have something that's a tool that's helping build more of the reading instructional level, something else that's going to help them with some guided reading practice. Another piece that's going to spend 10 minutes working on language, grammar, usage, mechanics skills. So if you're working with us, we're going to create a work plan for you that's going to spell out and break apart those things for you. Just something, if you're not working with us, I wanted to give you some guidelines, some ideas of kind of, ballpark maybe where to shoot for. Similarly, I did the similar thing with math, science, and social studies. In math, you may choose to have, especially at the younger level, a core math program, something else that's working on math facts, and maybe something else that's supplemental. Either it's filling in skill gaps or it's some enrichment, practice reviewing some skills in a more fun way. You may want to break it apart. So if you do all of it, especially with a younger kid, to spend the maybe 40, 50, 60 minutes you should be spending in math to have enough time for the brain to learn the skills, you do it all in one piece, it may be too much. But if you break it up and we're doing this part in our core program, now we're moving on to this piece, now we're doing this piece, breaking it apart can make it more manageable and get more time for the brain working on building. Your brain needs time to build the neural pathways. That's in anything. Our approach is we break it into some smaller chunks for the students. It's not so overwhelming as if I was going to sit and work on math for 45 minutes. That's how we tend to approach it. I encourage you to consider some instructional time for science as well as some hands-on time. Hands-on learning is important. So if you're just doing online computer stuff, do something else offline computer, do something else. You get some hands-on. You look up a experiment or something to go along with the topic you were just learning about. Social studies, it may not have to be every day at the younger ages, maybe a few times a week. It might be, especially if you bring in some good read alouds, good historical fiction, some good documentaries, in there. So I suggest somewhere in the hour and a half to 2 hours ish range generally on the reading and language arts. You see at the younger levels, I'm suggesting roughly 2 hours total between math, science, and social studies. By the time you're getting to high school, about an hour per subject is appropriate for high school level. And middle school level should be building towards that. But that's generally when you're talking about high school credit, about an hour per subject area per day is a reasonable, appropriate amount to be shooting toward. And again, the reason why I suggest more with the reading and language arts is because you're talking about, even if it's theoretically one subject, there's a lot of skills being worked on. You may choose one semester to focus more on some literature and next semester focus more on some writing, but most kids really need to be working on writing all through every year. And I do recommend we get them up to, if they're struggling reader, if they're coming along as a developmentally, maybe they're just a second grader and they're reading at second grade reading level, encourage some little stories and take down a little dictation of whatever their little something they're telling you. But formal reading instruction, once they've gotten to around third, fourth grade reading level, is when I suggest doing some more formal writing instruction. I think they get more out of it once they've gotten to that level. But once they're at that point, they need to be writing and working on building writing skills a lot. It takes time. And I know sometimes people are like, oh, we're going to work on literature this semester, and the next semester we're going to work on writing. If you do that, you lose too much practice opportunity. So make sure you're at least writing about the literature. That writing is a skill that needs a lot of time to practice. So all of those skill areas need to be thought of in terms of, an English curriculum. And so even if they're in high school, I strongly encourage you. And honestly, even in traditional school, you're going to have more English homework typically. You'd be expected to have half an hour of English homework outside of class. You'd have your hour of class, 50 minutes in class in school, and then you'd have some more reading and writing. And that's generally for most high schoolers, one of the more time-intensive parts of their homework. Just planning for more time for that, not feeling like I should be getting it all done in an hour. It's going to be more realistic towards building the skills they truly need. In our modern world, there is so much text. So some of our struggling learners, particularly dyslexics I often work with, they're very smart. They're feeling pretty dumb. It's important to take away the shame. Sometimes they need to know the name. What is it I'm dealing with? Dyslexia. That, I have difficulty with reading, but I'm wired for strengths in these other areas. one of my other talk, Dyslexia Outside the Box, focuses on those flip side strengths and challenges. If they're having a learning challenge, they already know they're different. I mean, you're not hiding anything from them. If they're starting to like, especially, what's wrong with me, or they're calling themselves stupid, exploring together what that means to learn differently can help. If you have a name, they often assume the worst. They often think they're broken. They're not broken. Their brain's just wired differently. And there are, like with dyslexics, there's 1 in 6 individuals have dyslexia. You are not alone. Computation, I always have to throw this in here. We, in our upbringing, most of us in the age we were growing up, lots and lots of long division, long multiplication, long addition, long subtraction problems was a part of our curriculum. And it was expected to be super important. And we spent weeks and weeks and weeks, months perhaps. How many of you, other than helping your child with their homework, when is the last time that you did a long division problem? Or even a long multiplication problem? Right. We don't hardly ever use those skills. We all have these little handy dandy fonts of all knowledge, otherwise known as our smartphones, at our fingertips. So when our teacher said, "Are you going to have a calculator with you everywhere you go?" Yeah, we do. So knowing what to punch in, knowing what's reasonable, and being able to apply it to real world problems is far more important in today's modern world. So if your kid's struggling, I'm not saying don't teach them long addition, long subtraction, long multiplication, long division. Understanding the concept of those things and what they mean and when you would use it is far more important. And some kids, like dyslexics, about 50% of dyslexics have trouble with procedural processing, which means remembering the steps in order, what you need to do. Having a little cheat card, a little reminder card of what to do with those steps, of some things that they need to do repeatedly that maybe they don't. But again, if your son is going to build my deck when he grows up, and he doesn't know how to estimate or to plan out the right amount of lumber, and he ends up ordering it in 2 batches because he didn't plan enough, and now my deck doesn't match because he didn't use his calculator to figure out and know what was a reasonable amount to order, that's a problem. If he's going to quote me my deck and he doesn't even get in the right ballpark in his quote, computation, and they can't remember how to do a long multiplication problem, it's going to be a good use of his time anyhow to sit there and do a long multiplication problem? Of course not. But get out your calculator and calculate it for me. So that's my little soapbox about not spending too much time beating your head against the wall over those computation skills, because sometimes kids start to think of themselves as bad at math when actually they're not bad at math. They actually can grasp much higher concepts if they haven't given up on themselves because they had trouble with remembering some steps in some computation problems. So you need partners in your student success. The parent, of course, is a key person. A supportive friend, especially if you don't have a supportive spouse that's supporting you in your homeschooling, but even if you do, a supportive friend who gets homeschooling, who gets maybe your child's wiring is really important. You may need a specialist or a tutor on your team, and you might choose to have Wings to Soar as a part of it. But whether or not we're there, whether you're other people's in your support, maybe it's a homeschool co-op group, maybe it's some other activity that you're involved with, there's something else that's a part of your team. With it all, your student is at the center as a whole person, and they need that network of support. Don't do it alone, whether you're working with us at Wings to Soar or whether you're reaching out to other support networks, homeschool support groups online. If you aren't in a place that has a good homeschool support group locally, there are lots of great Facebook groups that I frequently see people posting in. Great questions, great answers. So get involved and connected there if you're feeling alone. If you are with Wings to Soar, we have our Wings to Soar Parents Place group. I'm not as active in facilitating as I maybe should be, but it is a place that you can connect with other parents. So don't do it alone. If you choose to work with Wings to Soar, briefly, Path to Success, we call our Path to Success personalized learning plan. And what Path to Success stands for is they're personalized. We use adaptive technology. They're technology enhanced. You're still homeschooling. You're still a homeschooler. But you also have the expertise of our teachers to lean into. It is online, so wherever you are, they have internet, you can do. You don't have to take your kid to a tutor, drive across town, sit and wait. Our programs are student-centered. We use a coaching approach with students and with parents. Often that coaching just takes place in an email or a quick chat. We do also have coaching available, mostly full, but we have a little bit of coaching available with some of our teachers. We try to encourage community between students and amongst parents. Our programs are for the most part engaging. I mean, yes, they're still school, they're still learning, but kids tend to like many of the programs. Our goal is to see kids succeed, find success, and that they are soaring. It's not uncommon that I have a student for 2 to 4 years and then they move on because they have gained the wings to soar and they don't need us anymore. And they can thrive in any other curriculum environment, any other environment, and they're ready to move on. Whereas I miss them, that I also let them go and let them soar. So if you're interested in working with Wings to Soar, just write level assessments is your first step, and then the jump start, the 2-week jump start would come next. So I would love to work with you if you're interested. So if you need help figuring out which way to go, you are certainly welcome to fill out a contact form on our website or schedule. There's a link to my scheduling calendar on the website if you want to pick my brain about whether Wings to Soar is a good fit for your child.